But I wanted to say, first of all, I've been simplifying the sequence a little bit more to emphasize certain practices. And I'm thinking of it as you really want to spend your time with dropping anchor and then dipping in and out the stream. You might have urge surfing in there as well if you're dealing with physical compulsions more. And then we're into values-based ERP. And then we might be doing the supplementary things. We might be doing more self-compassion, savoring and gratitude. But really that sequence of dropping anchor, dipping in and out of the stream, values-based ERP as the sort of core components. Now, of course, assuming that you are doing the values and goals and motivation, connection, and the workability, that they are really still key aspects. So you want to spend your time there. And if you're feeling more comfortable with your skills and your recovery process, you might spend a lot of time on the values-based ERP and the dipping in and out of the stream. But if you are struggling and you're feeling like it's hard to do ERP, or you're really getting caught with your mind still and dipping in and out the stream is tough, then we're going back a few layers. So we're going dropping anchor, and within dropping anchor, we might do more diffusion practice. We might be noticing, naming our thoughts. We might be doing acceptance of body feelings and sensations more using dropping anchor. We're building up those skills again before we move up that sequence of dipping in and out of the stream, values-based exposure, and self-compassion. I mean, I would include that in there really as well. And you could do a practice sequence like that. You could do all of those things. As you progress, you might warm up with dipping in and out the stream, and then be doing some values-based ERP, and then some self-compassion to finish. So really, these things, if you put in the time, you are going to develop the skills you need to break the mental compulsions, to urge surf the physical compulsions, to get better at accepting the intrusive thoughts, to get better at focusing on values no matter what your mind is doing, getting better at letting go of mental compulsions. You're going to develop all those skills really nicely. And so I would really advise, putting your time into those practices. Um, then within those practices, there are different layers. So within dropping anchor, we've got the full defined, really taking time with acknowledging thoughts and feelings, maybe with our labels, maybe doing some acceptance work like name, and really focusing in on the feeling and making room for it. And we might be doing that very long and expanded, and then spending a lot of time with the body, and then a lot of time engaging. And that might be the sort of level one. Then we're crunching it down and making it faster and more responsive. And we might drop out the middle phase. So we're just doing the acknowledge phase and the engage phase. We're not running through the whole sequence anymore. And we're doing that much more briefly in the moment as we go through life. And then finally, we might be at a point where we are doing more engage. Actually, the OCD is the reminder to focus on the present moment and let the intrusive thoughts come and go as we engage in life. And so that might be what we build up to over time. And then we can go back down that sequence if we're struggling. So if we're overwhelmed again, we go right back to the beginning. If we are not so overwhelmed, but our mind's a bit tricky, we're maybe doing the briefer version or the acknowledge and engage version. And if we're feeling more skillful, we're really engaged in life, and we're training our attention to be really present as we participate in life and engage in our values. So hopefully that makes sense. The other things with drop and anchor, we might be adding in values and workability reflection to get our motivation up to work on stuff. We might be adding in self-compassion to increase our self-compassion if we're experiencing guilt and shame. And the final things I'm going to say, and feel free to re-listen to this if I'm giving you too many options. We've got dropping anchor for overwhelm and waking up the body. So for overwhelm is when we are really panicky, dissociated, we're experiencing very intense symptoms that are too hard to work with. Okay, look on my YouTube channel, find dropping anchor for overwhelm, spend more time with that practice. Waking up the body is when we're a bit depressed and our motivation is low and it's hard to get going. Okay, go onto YouTube, look up um, dropping anchor, waking up the body, and spend some time with those practices if you have either of those difficulties. Then within we've got urge surfing, which is very related to dropping anchor. It's just we're adding in this metaphor of the wave. The urge is like a wave that is intense on the way up, crests, and then gets easier. And we are noticing and investigating the urge, really thinking about our motivation a bit more. So we're connecting to that as we need to. And then we got a chosen values-based alternative to focus on and to engage in. It's really dropping anchor though, but just with the motivation part and not using the body, although you could also come back to your body during urge surfing as well, and that might be helpful if you're really feeling physically like you want to go and do a compulsion, or you're really stuck in rumination. Then getting into your body is always going to be helpful. Then dipping in and out the stream, we've got these different progressions with that. We've got the easy loop. So we choose something we would daydream about. We choose a holiday to think about, a favorite activity, a favorite sports team, a favorite band, or just think about someone you like, think about your pet, whatever, and just ruminate about that pleasant thing, and then practice dipping in and out of that with dropping anchor. Next level, we've got an everyday worry. So, it's not OCD yet, but it's a decision. It's a thing we're stressing over. It's a worry. It's a memory that is difficult, but it's not traumatic. So it's something that is a bit more painful, and we're practicing revving up that thought loop, getting stuck in it, and then practice stepping back, diffusing, engaging in life, getting back into the thought loop, in, out, 3, 4 times. And by going in and out of it, we're learning what it's like to be really caught in compulsion, and then what it's like to be stood on the riverbank observing it and then engaging in life. And then finally, we're working it with our OCD when we really can do all of those steps and we can do them all skillfully. Then we are spending time with our OCD mental compulsions. If we find trying to work with mental compulsions just gets us more tangled up and we're not really able to do it without doing more compulsions, it's a sign to go back down that chain and to work the easy loop, the mildly stressful loop, or maybe just drop an anchor into fusion until we're more skilled at that. And then guide it again once we've built that up a bit more. We've also got the threat monitoring. If we're doing a lot of body checking and monitoring, or checking and monitoring the external environment, we can practice, get our attention onto the thing we're checking and monitoring, and then acknowledge and engage and allow it to be there, and back and forth with that. So that's good for anything when we're checking our body, like health anxiety, or any of the taboo OCD thoughts. We might be checking for arousal, or checking for attraction or other feelings. We might be checking for impulses with harm. We might be checking our feelings in relationship OCD, or we might be checking our sense of self and existential OCD. So anything we're sort of checking and monitoring, we can do that with. And that can be a good thing to do. Also with feelings, if we're really struggling with a feeling, we can practice, okay, let's get into threat monitoring the panic, and then let's practice actually accepting the panic and engaging, and back and forth and back and forth. So that's through to dipping in and out the stream. Then we've got values-based ERP, values-based exposure. So we're connecting to values, we're emphasizing skills, we're maybe bringing in compassion, and we're using the ACT skills to do the RP, the response prevention part of ERP, exposure and response prevention. So remember, we got these different levels. So level 1, we might slow down, we get in touch with the trigger, whether that's something, a situation we're actually physically in the world, or we're watching something, reading something, or we're simulating difficult thoughts. We get in touch with a trigger, and level one of ERP is we pause or really slow down and we take our time doing like the full dropping anchor and full urge surfing and really spend some time getting diffused, accepting, refocusing and engaging, and then we get in touch with the trigger again and we do it a little bit back and forth, light dipping in and out of the stream, but we're not ruminating. We are going for visual triggers, situational triggers, simulated video, or written triggers, things like that. And we can gradually build that up. We can start with easy things and move up to more difficult things over time. That's level one. Level two, same thing, but much briefer. So we're not pausing so long. We're not doing a full, acceptance practice where we're scanning the whole body and working acceptance of the feeling in the chest and then acceptance of the feeling in the abdomen and the whole body. Instead of that, we're just briefly noticing the whole body and accepting whatever shows up, whatever's strongest. And then we're refocusing and engaging in either the exposure or another valued activity. Um, and then the final level is actually we just stay in contact with the difficulty and we work our skills as we need to. So if you're watching a video, you keep the video playing and you just watch it, engage in it, and you use your skills as you need to. So as you notice your mind going off into rumination, you start to diffuse. As you notice yourself struggling with a feeling, you start to accept. You notice yourself getting distracted, you refocus, engage. You notice your motivation is low. You think about values and workability. You notice shame. You think about self-compassion. So you're working responsively as you need to. And you might not need to that much. You might be engaged and then just once or twice you're having to do that. Or it might be you're doing it a lot, but it's all happening very quickly, responsively in the moment. So, to do one example of that sequence, level one with a video would be I'm literally pausing the video and I'm doing a very long drop in anchor, and I might be focusing on another video or the world around me, and then I'm playing the video again. And level two is like I might still pause it, but it's much briefer. And then I'm back in engaging with the video again. And then final level is I just play the video the whole way through and I'm just using my skills as I need to. I'm not pausing. I'm not really coming out of it too much. I'm using my skills very briefly and responsively in the moment. In a situation, you could do the same. You get in touch with the trigger in a situation. Touch something that's contaminated, or you resist checking, or you chop some food with a sharp knife, or you spend time around the person that's triggering. And if you can actually slow down if it's socially okay to do so. Sometimes you can't because you're talking to someone, but if you can, you sort of slow down a bit as you're chopping the food. You might slow down a bit and then notice the harm, intrusive thoughts, or the impulses, and accept the feelings, and then get into your body and then engage again. The next level, you're not slowing down so much, you're not pausing, you're continuing with the physical exposure, but you're doing briefer dropping anchors or acknowledging and engaging. And then finally, you're just continuing with whatever the practice is, but you're using your skills as you need to, as you notice mental compulsions, as you notice intense feelings, as you notice drop in motivation, shame, you go into the appropriate tool from the toolkit in the moment. And yeah, that's some of the key things I wanted to talk about. I also wanted to talk about you know, it's always going to be helpful to do self-compassion alongside this. So doing the self-compassion to your history, to any difficult, painful memories in the past, also doing the self-compassion in the moment, doing the compassion for feelings. And you can add those practices into the exposure if you need to. If you're really struggling to do it, or you're noticing a lot of shame, your inner critic is really loud as you do exposure work, then bring, kind hand into it and say something self-compassionate, always with diffusion first. So you diffuse the inner critic, you accept the feeling of shame, and then you offer yourself self-compassion. So I would be doing that as well. I think everyone who did the course would benefit from that. Um, and then we've got some other things. We've got the savoring and gratitude and engaging in values and trying to enhance life. And we want to move towards that being a big part of our practice over time as well, so that we are really boosting up our ability to enjoy our lives and be present and engaged in it. And there's other additional tools within the course, but that's really how I'm seeing it. So you are getting good with dropping anchor, you're then getting good with urge surfing and dipping in and out the stream, and you're doing lots of values-based ERP in lots of different situations. So sometimes imaginal, mental rehearsal things, imaginal triggers, sometimes visual, watching things, looking at pictures, reading things, sometimes out in the world situationally. You're trying to think of as many different ways you can challenge yourself, and then doing them all the same way, using your skills and practicing in all these different domains. And then over time, moving so that it's more a way of life, that if you notice avoidance and it's important for you to challenge it because of your values, then you challenge it, and you're doing it there and then. Um, I would recommend everyone continues with their practice for a good length of time. If you get to a better place with your OCD, you might still continue it. I would say so. I mean, I practice every day, and it just deepens over time. You can shorten the length of time you practice as you get better in your recovery. In the beginning, you might be doing the half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours a day. And then when you're in a better place in recovery, you might do 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and alternate the different practices. But I would keep it going and don't ease off when things get better too much until you're really confident in what you're doing, because it can sneak up back on you without you realizing. So I think extended long period of practice is key. And um, you might be very targeted in your ERP while you are struggling. Then as you get better, you might move to more skills-based practice and keeping the skills strong. And then if you find the OCD pattern showing up somewhere new or different, you're ready for it and you are ready to apply your skills. And you might need to increase the ERP again if you find yourself getting caught or struggling with that. It's not something I do these days, but I would do it if I needed to. If something showed up and it was a bit tricky, I would increase my values-based ERP for that. Remember the core fear practice. Sometimes when your skills are stronger, it's worth spending good time with that, digging under, like, and then what? This bad thing would happen, and then what? And then what? And then what? Or why? Why is that bad? Why is that bad? And really trying to dig into like what sits underneath it, and then doing some imaginal exposure to thoughts about those fears and worries and concerns can be very helpful. If you're really stuck looking at your beliefs and what unworkable beliefs might be tripping you up, and trying to identify more workable beliefs. So if you still think thoughts and feelings are always accurate and are always important, that's a belief we still got to change, because they're not always important, they're not always accurate, and they're just information, and sometimes they're helpful and sometimes they're not, and you get to learn to choose what is helpful and what isn't. So something like that, you might need to identify the more workable belief and then practice it through ERP. If you're still stuck, working on your history might be helpful. If you've got traumatic difficult things in the past, either with a therapist, or if you're feeling better in your recovery skills, working yourself in doing exposure to the memories, just like ERP, but you're using the memory as the thing you're doing imaginal exposure to, or compassion to, or both, ideally both, sending compassion to that younger self.